The museum was silent, except for the whisper of rain on the old glass roof. In the center of the main gallery, beneath a failing chandelier, hung a painting that should not exist, dated 1534. Its gilded frame was cracked, the paint bruised with centuries of dust, yet in the distance of the sacred scene shimmered a skyline of steel towers and glowing windows. Dr. Eleanor Voss had spent 20 years uncovering forgeries and lost masterpieces, but never anything like this. She could feel the air vibrating as if the painting itself was breathing. Every expert had declared it authentic, every pigment, every brushstroke true to its age. And still, that skyline burned behind the saint's halo, like a memory of a future not yet lived. Why did the bell in the clock tower outside ring when no one was there to pull the rope? What vanished from the church that night? And why did it leave a name behind? If the dead answered the call once, what happens when it rings again? Morning came gray and silent. The museum doors were sealed, guards posted outside. News spread fast. A painting from 1534 showing a modern skyline. Photos appeared online, but every image soon vanished, corrupted beyond repair. Eleanor sat in her office, trembling hands gripping a cup of cold coffee. Gabriel had not returned her calls. The director ordered the painting quarantined, calling it a case of optical interference. But Eleanor knew what she saw. The skyline moved. Somewhere between reality and paint, something was waiting. That night, Gabriel broke the lock and entered the gallery alone. His footsteps echoed like distant heartbeats. The air was colder here, still carrying the charge of the storm. The painting stood under a white sheet, trembling slightly in the draft. He lifted the cloth and saw light, faint, blue, and pulsing from beneath the varnish. Then came whispers. Thousands of them, overlapping and indecipherable. His pulse quickened. He reached out his hand, and the voices stopped. In their place came silence so heavy it pressed against his skull. By dawn, Gabriel was found collapsed near the painting. His pulse was erratic, his skin ice cold. The security footage showed only static, a blur of blue light flickering across the frame. When Eleanor arrived, she froze. The painting had changed again. Now a bridge stretched from the skyline toward the viewer, unfinished but unmistakably new. She knew what it meant. The city in the painting was building its way here. That evening, Eleanor returned alone. The air in the gallery was motionless. She lifted the cloth and froze. A figure now stood in the painting, halfway across the bridge, looking out. His face was blurred, incomplete, but unmistakably human. As she leaned closer, the reflection beside him formed her own. The paint shimmered, the air thickened, and the faint toll of the bell echoed once more. Then, darkness. 3 days after the night of the bell, the museum reopened under strict supervision. Reporters circled outside like vultures, their voices echoing through the marble halls. But inside, everything was still. The painting now hung in a sealed glass case, guarded and untouched. Yet it seemed to breathe when no one was watching. Eleanor felt drawn to it. An invisible pull she couldn't resist. She told herself it was curiosity, but deep down she knew something inside the canvas was alive. Each night the air grew colder, the lights dimmer. The skyline seemed to inch closer to the saint in the foreground, as if the city was swallowing history itself. No one else noticed, but Eleanor could see new brushstrokes forming where none existed before. Gabriel awoke in the hospital at midnight. Heart monitor steady for the first time. He didn't remember collapsing, only the whispers. His first words were a question. Did it follow us? The nurse didn't understand, but Eleanor did. She visited him the next morning, her expression hollow. He described a dream, walking across a bridge of light toward a skyline that stretched forever. The buildings hummed like tuning forks, each vibrating with sound that wasn't music. He said someone was waiting at the other side, a figure that wore her face. The next day, the museum's surveillance system recorded something strange. At 3:03 a.m., every camera pointed at the painting flickered simultaneously. For 6 seconds, static filled the feed. Then, a faint image appeared. It wasn't the painting, but a view of a city from above. Neon lights, highways, and endless towers vanishing into fog. The footage cut abruptly back to normal, but the timestamp had advanced 20 years. When Eleanor showed it to Gabriel, he said nothing, only whispered, "It's building the bridge faster." That evening, Eleanor locked herself in the gallery with the painting. The museum was silent, except for the hum of the city outside. She sat before the glass, studying every line of paint, every shimmer. As hours passed, her reflection in the glass seemed to change, smiling when she wasn't, tilting its head when she didn't move. At 2:17 a.m., the lights flickered once, and her reflection vanished entirely. For one suspended breath, she saw not herself but the skyline, alive, glowing, pulsing with light, and a single tower blinking like a signal. The next morning, guards found Eleanor asleep in front of the painting. The room temperature had dropped to near freezing. Frost lined the glass case from the inside, forming patterns that looked like city streets seen from above. Gabriel arrived moments later and pressed his hand against the glass. It was warm. He turned toward her, whispering, "It's reaching through." In that moment, the frost began to melt from the center outward, revealing a new detail within the painting. A woman's figure standing on the bridge, wearing Eleanor's face. The museum closed indefinitely. Officials claimed environmental instability had damaged the artwork, but those who had seen it whispered otherwise. The painting was moved to an underground vault, locked behind reinforced glass and temperature control. Yet even sealed away, it didn't stop changing. Eleanor couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the glowing bridge stretching further, heard the hum of a city she had never visited but somehow recognized. Gabriel warned her not to go near it again, but she knew she would. Some callings can't be silenced. Late that night, Eleanor's phone buzzed. An encrypted message appeared. No sender, no timestamp. It contained a single photograph. The painting, fully lit, now showing a completed bridge reaching from the skyline directly to the viewer's edge. Beneath it, one phrase, "It's open." Her breath caught. She called Gabriel immediately, but the line was filled with static. Somewhere on the other end, through distortion and noise, she thought she heard a voice whisper her name. Gabriel arrived at her apartment at dawn, drenched from rain, eyes wide with something close to madness. He had been to the museum. The vault was empty. The painting was gone. Eleanor felt her stomach twist. Security claimed the cameras failed. The sensors never triggered. Gabriel swore he saw tracks. Not of feet, but something dragged across the floor, leaving faint streaks of oil and dust. The vault door had been locked from the inside. He whispered one thing before sitting down. It walked out. By evening, the city changed. People began reporting strange lights over the river, silver reflections where no buildings stood. News stations called them atmospheric anomalies. Gabriel and Eleanor knew better. They drove to the bridge that overlooked the water and saw it, faint but there, a shimmer in the fog like glass towers forming in the air. The skyline from the painting, real, rising from the mist. Gabriel whispered, "It's crossing over." Eleanor couldn't speak. She could only stare as one by one, the lights of the painted city began to appear in her own. That night, Eleanor dreamed she stood on the bridge. The city ahead was endless, windows glowing like stars, streets pulsing with sound. Behind her, the world she knew was fading, dissolving into paint and light. She heard Gabriel calling her name, distant and distorted, as if from underwater. Ahead of her stood the same figure she had seen in the painting, a man in a gray suit with hollow eyes and a calm smile. "You've always lived here," he said softly. When she reached out, the world shattered into white. Eleanor woke to find her window open, the sound of distant bells echoing faintly through the morning fog. Her heartbeat raced as she turned toward the desk. On it lay a photograph of the painting, printed freshly, though her printer hadn't been touched. The bridge was gone now, replaced by an empty expanse of mist. Only one detail remained: a silhouette of herself standing within the skyline, faint, translucent, as if painted into the scene. Gabriel called moments later, voice trembling. The museum's vault was glowing. When Eleanor reached the museum, the staff had gathered outside, staring at the glowing light beneath the vault doors. The air smelled of ozone, faintly metallic. The security locks had melted, not broken, melted, edges fused smooth like glass. Inside, the vault was empty again, but the walls glistened with moisture, reflecting the faint outline of skyscrapers that weren't really there. The temperature dropped sharply, her breath turning white. She touched the metal floor. It pulsed like a heartbeat. By evening, reports began flooding in from across the city. Lights flickering in windows where no power was connected. Reflections of towers and puddles, even when the skyline was clear. Gabriel visited Eleanor with trembling hands, clutching a notebook. He had translated part of an inscription hidden behind the painting's frame. To those who see the end before it begins, build the path. He believed the painting wasn't predicting the future, it was creating it. That night, Eleanor and Gabriel drove to the edge of the old industrial district, where the river turned black and the city lights faded. There, amid the ruins of factories, they found it. A structure of glass and steel rising from the mist. It wasn't entirely there, shimmering like a mirage, humming softly with invisible energy. Eleanor stepped closer, heart pounding. It looked exactly like the bridge from the painting. The air around it rippled. Alive, she whispered. It's not a prophecy. It's a door. As Eleanor reached out, her hand passed through the air, and the fog pulsed outward like a living thing. Light swallowed the night, and for one brief instant she saw herself standing on the other side, within the skyline, smiling back at her. Gabriel shouted her name, but the sound bent and distorted. She turned once more toward him, whispered something he couldn't hear, and vanished. When the light faded, the bridge was gone, leaving only ripples in the river and the faint toll of a bell drifting through the air. For 3 days, no one saw Eleanor. The museum remained closed, and Gabriel spent every hour combing through reports of unexplained lights, strange signals, and sightings near the river. Then, a security guard from a nearby ferry terminal reported something extraordinary. A woman standing in the mist, barefoot, staring toward the skyline that wasn't there. Gabriel drove through the storm to find her. The closer he came to the river, the more the air shimmered, like heat above asphalt. The radio crackled with static that shaped itself into a whisper. She's waiting. When Gabriel reached the riverbank, Eleanor stood there as if frozen in time. Her eyes glowed faintly, not unnaturally, but like she was illuminated from within. She turned slowly toward him, rain cascading down her face. It's not another world, she said softly. It's ours, but later. Gabriel took a hesitant step forward, his voice trembling. What did you see? She smiled sadly, glancing toward the fog. The city is us, what we become. But something waits inside it, and it's waking up. They returned to the museum that night. It was empty, silent except for the echo of their steps. The walls felt different, warmer, almost pulsing. The air carried a faint hum like the sound of distant engines. Where the painting had once hung, there was now only a blackened imprint shaped like a doorway. Eleanor moved closer, the sound intensifying as she did. It's calling, she murmured. Gabriel reached for her hand, but the wall rippled like water, glowing briefly at her touch. For a second, he saw another world inside. The same skyline, only alive. Breathing. Endless. The next day, the river began to glow. Thousands gathered along its banks as the fog thickened, forming shapes, outlines of streets, glass towers, bridges. The city that once existed in the painting was materializing in the air above the water. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the impossible. Eleanor and Gabriel stood together, speechless. "It's merging," Gabriel whispered. The painting was just the beginning. The frame was the barrier. The towers brightened, and for a fleeting instant, the skyline appeared complete. Then, one by one, the lights blinked out, as if something vast had opened its eyes. That night, as the city slept, the bells rang again, soft, distant, yet echoing through every street. Eleanor stood at her window, eyes fixed on the skyline. The towers were gone, but their afterimage glowed faintly on the horizon, like embers of a dream refusing to die. Gabriel's voice came through the phone, low and steady. "The painting's gone from the vault." Again, Eleanor didn't move. She whispered into the receiver, "It's not gone. It's spreading." Outside, lights across the city flickered once in unison, and then silence. 2 weeks passed. The skyline no longer appeared over the river, but reports of distortions spread through the city. Walls that shimmered like glass, reflections that lingered even after the person had moved away. Gabriel pored over ancient journals, tracing the painter's lineage. Hieronymus Vantor, it turned out, had vanished in 1534. On the same day, his final painting was completed. Eleanor grew quieter each day, her eyes distant, her pulse faintly slower than normal. She spoke of hearing low tones in the air. Not quite sound, more like vibration. "They're building," she said softly, "and I think they're using us." The following evening, Gabriel discovered something extraordinary, or horrifying. Buried within one of Vantor's marginal sketches was a depiction of the same bridge, annotated with strange symbols resembling equations. Below it was written, "For those who finish what I began." He realized the pigment in the painting contained rare metallic compounds, ones that reacted to electromagnetic frequencies. The painting wasn't just art, it was technology, centuries ahead of its time. And the city it showed wasn't being predicted, it was being transmitted. That night, the humming returned. Stronger, lower, vibrating through the foundations of every building near the river. The air shimmered faintly, like heat over sand. Windows reflected skylines that didn't exist. Eleanor felt drawn outside, barefoot, unable to resist. Gabriel followed, shouting her name, but the sound seemed swallowed by the fog. She reached the river's edge and turned back once, smiling with tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful, Gabriel. Can't you hear them?" The water erupted with light. The explosion of light subsided into silence. When Gabriel's vision cleared, Eleanor was gone. Only her footprints remained in the wet earth. The river had stilled completely. No ripples, no reflection. Just a flat, mirror-like surface that showed a skyline no longer matching their world. He knelt by the edge, trembling, whispering her name. Then, in the water's reflection, she appeared, standing among glass towers, looking directly at him. Her lips moved, but he couldn't hear. Slowly, she raised her hand and placed it against the invisible barrier between them. He did the same. Days later, Gabriel stopped sleeping. He spent his nights by the river, notebook on his lap, recording faint signals that pulsed at the same frequency as the museum's lights once did. The hum had changed. It now carried rhythm, like a heartbeat. On the 7th night, he finally heard her voice again, whispering through the static. "It's almost complete." Behind him, the skyline appeared once more, rising from the mist, brighter, closer, alive. Gabriel smiled faintly, eyes wet. "Then so am I," he murmured. It had been 1 month since Eleanor vanished. The city above the river was no longer a rumor. It was visible at dusk, suspended in the air like a mirage. Governments declared it a spatial anomaly, sealing the area, but people gathered every evening to watch the reflection of towers shimmer across the water. Gabriel's health had declined, yet he remained by the river, recording every change. He claimed the skyline shifted depending on who looked at it, showing them what they feared or longed for most. But Gabriel saw only one thing: Eleanor, waiting among the towers, always turning away before he could call her name. One night, Gabriel's recording device picked up something new. A human voice beneath the hum. The words were fragmented, layered, and faint, but one name emerged, clearly: Vanter. It repeated again and again, almost like a chant. He realized the signal wasn't random. It was building a pattern, forming coordinates. With trembling hands, he mapped them onto a city grid. The location pointed directly beneath the museum. The painting's origin had never been a mystery of art. It was a blueprint. Gabriel returned to the museum one final time. The guards had long abandoned their posts. The building had become a relic, swallowed by silence. In the center of the main gallery where the painting once hung, the wall pulsed faintly like living tissue. He approached it, placing his palm on the cool surface. For a brief second, the skyline flickered into view. Not reflected this time, but real, visible through the wall like a window. And standing at the edge of that world was Eleanor. She smiled softly, eyes filled with light. "Eleanor," he whispered. Her lips moved, though he couldn't hear. Then her voice came not from her mouth, but from everywhere. The hum of the walls, the vibration in the air, the pulse in his own chest. "It's finished," she said. "The bridge is complete." He felt warmth spread through his fingers, up his arm into his heart. The walls dissolved into mist, and light poured in, the skyline now fully formed, vibrant and alive. He took one step forward, and the air swallowed him whole. The next morning, the museum was gone. Where it had stood was now an open courtyard, the ground smooth as glass. Those who approached claimed to see faint shapes beneath the surface. Towers, bridges, silhouettes, walking in silence. News stations reported unexplained disappearance, and officials fenced off the site. But every night, when the fog rolled in, the skyline appeared again, and two figures stood at its edge, hand in hand, watching a city that belonged to both past and future. The mystery of the painting was never solved. It simply became the world that replaced ours.